Good afternoon, students. Today we are starting to look at the next issue of development that we be looking at during this course, that is gender development. This is basically to look at women's experiences and interest in development, which is been around over the last 40 years, and initially was seen to be what they call it, a diversion from the real issues of poverty and economic modernization. So people thought that women's interest in development is basically a fanatic move or feminist move, merely a fanatic and feminist move. But however, today we see that women's interest and gender equity are routinely included in the design and implementation of development projects, policies, and strategies. Now, the question for us in this class is, how did this come about? Now, this is what this lecture attempt to answer. So we'll be looking at the history of women and development in order to answer the questions. We'll be looking at the unexamined biases throughout history, and we will be looking at example of men's and women's farming in the Gambia, and Esther Boshrup's idea of women and development. And then after that, we'll be looking at the rise of gender and development. So I hope you'll be looking at the differences between women and development and gender development. And with the rise of gender development, some of the important points will be the unequal gender relations. Yes, not just about women as women and men as men in development, but basically to look at relationship between men and women, because development has different implications for both men and women, and how development basically has impact on relationship between men and women. So that is why it's important to look at the unequal gender relations, and then we'll be looking at the emergence of gender and development, you see, and then we'll be looking at what is gender analysis and what can it tell us. So that is basically what the lecture is all about. And we begin by looking at certain concepts which are very important when we talk about women or gender issues in development. Firstly, I want to take us look to revisit the concept that I believe many of you have learned in your other classes. That is the concept of gender itself. Now, gender refers to the social organization and meaning of our biological sex, in a sense that its idea is not about biological base for gender. Yeah, the idea is there is no fixed biological base for gender, and the differences between men and women are cultural patterns. Yeah, and masculine from feminine do not simply express biological differences. Even when biology is involved, cultural processes are also at play. Yeah, for instance, women should be wearing the assumption that women should be wearing certain clothing or certain fashion, and men should be doing the same in the same manner. So gender is a social determinant like class and ethnicity. So gender is reproduced through beliefs, values, categories, social conventions, codes of conduct, advertisement, media, and etc. And also can be reproduced or produced through interaction and relationships between people, and also through formal and informal institutions, forms such as the household, the state, and the legal system. So gender is basically about social organization and the meaning that we give to our biological sex. Yeah, the meaning we give to who we are as born as men and women, or girls and boys, and how social our social surrounding, or our social context and our political context and economic context give meaning to those biological differences that we have when we are born. Now, the other two key concepts that we need to be reminded of is femininity and masculinity. Femininity and masculinity are clusters of ideas and values about what it means to be a woman or a man, and the differences between men and women. So men and women are seen to have specific qualities and characteristics, and consequently expected to behave in different ways, right? So that is basically how it's a clusters of ideas. So women are to do certain things and men are to do certain things. So those are clusters of ideas, and their values about men has to do certain things in order to represent himself as a man, his masculinity, and women have to do certain things to be feminine. Yeah. So there's a great deal of social and cultural variation in what it means to be a man or woman in definitions of feminine and masculine. We cannot put all women in one box and all men in another, but there are some patterns we can see, right? So we cannot just say, okay, women must do this, men must be behaving like this. They must follow these clusters of ideas and values, and yeah, we can't do that in real life. But there are patterns that we can see when we talk about femininity and masculinity. So the concepts of femininity and masculinity are part of a system of what we call gender ideology. It's which is imposed by forms of power. They reflect social norms and power relations. They also reproduce gender inequality, right? So femininity, masculinity fed into or form gender ideology. So an example of a gender ideology is the gender sexual division of labor, right? A division between tasks, which is we assign as male task or female task. Now, we take for example in 1950s in the West, the gender division of labor operated within two domains. At home, where women had separate tasks from men, which were often organized on inside-outside distinction. Yeah, so women work inside, that is the private sphere, and work inside the house. Outside the home, such as in the workplace or in public office, where men were expected to play the greater role. That is what we call the public sphere. So this division of labor is not limited to those in the West in 1950s. Even here in the East, or in the East, we have very clear gender division of labor, especially if you go to the longhouses. There are, for instance, a meal can be seen to indicate gender division of labor. Men is supposed to bring meat, women is supposed to bring vegetables to the table. So that is basically and the labor that they do in order to bring those very ingredients or item for the family to eat. So that is determined by gender ideology. Now the other key concept is gender role. Gender roles are learned behaviors in a given society community that condition which activities, tasks, and responsibilities are perceived as male or female. The concept of gender roles was developed by Caroline Moser, who recognized that in most societies, low-income women have a triple role, right? Unpaid reproductive, the women will have 3 roles at the same time. One, the woman is involved in unpaid reproductive roles, and it is also involved in low-paid productive work and unpaid community managing activities. Now, contrast this with the roles of men, yeah, the gender roles of men, which is low-income men primarily undertake higher paid productive work and are involved in higher status community leadership or political activities. So that is what Caroline pointed out, that in most societies there are activities, tasks, and responsibilities are perceived as male or female. So in ELIP there'll be a video on a couple of videos that I put up to pinpoint this concept in greater measure on gender equality.